Somewhere in 2023, a single individual sat at the center of a financial arrangement that most people in the global music industry would have considered structurally impossible just 5 years earlier. She wasn't a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. She wasn't a generational heiress to a fashion dynasty. She was a 26-year-old from Buriram, Thailand, a province so far off the international radar that most Americans couldn't locate it on a map. And she had just negotiated something the entertainment world rarely hands over willingly: ownership. When analysts and industry observers began tallying the full scope of her income architecture, brand ambassadorships, music royalties, live performance revenue, catalog rights, licensing streams, the numbers that emerged were extraordinary by any standard. Some estimates placed her brand deal income alone in a range that most mid-tier corporations would consider a significant quarterly revenue figure. And this was before accounting for the strategic asset she had just taken control of: her own music catalog. But here's the question that the headlines never quite answered. How does someone who entered a system specifically designed to own her image, her recordings, her commercial appeal, reverse that arrangement entirely and end up holding the deed? How did Lisa go from being a label's most valuable asset to being the owner of her own financial empire? That question has an answer. It's more calculated, more deliberate, and more structurally sophisticated than almost anyone outside of the finance and entertainment law world has explained. And by the time this video reaches its final chapter, every piece of that answer will be in front of you, including the one move that most commentators missed entirely, and that may turn out to be the most consequential decision she ever made. The foundation, from trainee contract to independent brand. To understand the financial architecture Lisa operates within today, you have to understand the system she came out of, because the contrast between the two is where the real story lives. In 2011, a 13-year-old girl boarded a plane from Thailand to Seoul, South Korea, to audition for YG Entertainment. YG is one of the so-called Big Three Korean entertainment conglomerates, a corporate structure with artist rosters, in-house production, management divisions, and a business model that has produced some of the highest-grossing entertainment acts in the world. The audition she was attending drew roughly 4,000 candidates. She was among a handful selected. What followed was 6 years of training, not rehearsals. Training, in the full industrial sense of the word. YG and its peers invest heavily in their trainees: language instruction, choreography, vocal development, media training, image management, and the investment is substantial. Industry insiders have estimated that the total cost of developing a single trainee to debut readiness can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The label fronts that cost. The artist, when they eventually debut, begins earning against it. And critically, the label retains control of the assets that get created: the master recordings, the licensing rights, often a significant share of merchandise and commercial revenue. This model has a parallel in professional sports. The label is the franchise. The artist is the drafted player. The franchise invested in your development, and in exchange, a meaningful share of your productive output flows back to them, sometimes for years. Lisa debuted with Blackpink in August of 2016. The group's commercial trajectory was, by any measure, historic. Within a few years, Blackpink had become one of the best-selling and most-streamed girl groups in the history of recorded music. Their social media followings dwarfed those of Western acts with decades of established careers. And within that group, Lisa was developing a commercial profile that stood apart even from the collective. Here's what most people don't realize about that period. The most significant interest Lisa was generating wasn't coming from music industry executives. It was coming from luxury brand marketing departments in Paris, Milan, and Tokyo. Because what the luxury goods industry had been searching for, quietly, urgently, was exactly the combination of qualities Lisa represented. She carried the global credibility of a top-tier K-pop act, which meant proven commercial conversion across multiple Asian markets. She had a visual identity that was immediately striking and photogenic at the level that luxury editorial demands. And she possessed something that no agency could manufacture: authentic cultural currency in multiple markets simultaneously. She wasn't Korean adjacent. She wasn't Pan-Asian in some vague, algorithmically convenient way. She was genuinely Thai, genuinely K-pop, and genuinely global. A combination the industry had not previously encountered in quite this configuration. We'll return to what that geographic positioning actually means for the dollars and cents of her income equation. But first, let's look at the deals themselves, because the way she structured her brand portfolio is where her financial thinking becomes impossible to dismiss. The portfolio, decoding the luxury deal strategy. Not all brand partnerships are the same. This is one of the most consistently misunderstood dimensions of celebrity finance, and it matters enormously for understanding what Lisa has built. The brand partnership landscape, particularly in luxury goods, operates across a rough spectrum of 3 tiers. At the entry level, you have endorsement agreements, short-term, transactional, typically tied to a specific campaign or product launch. The artist wears the clothes, appears in the images, and receives a fee. These deals can be substantial in dollar terms, but they're structurally ephemeral. The brand rents your face for a season and moves on. The second tier is a formal ambassadorship. This involves a longer commitment, deeper creative integration, and significantly higher compensation. The ambassador attends runway shows, anchors global campaign imagery, participates in brand storytelling across multiple platforms. The relationship has continuity and accumulates symbolic value over time. The third tier, the one that changes the financial equation entirely, is a global brand ambassador appointment. These arrangements are rare. They carry exclusivity clauses that prevent competing brand relationships. They run for multiple years. They involve negotiated minimums that are categorically different from what the lower tiers command. And they confer something beyond money. They transfer brand positioning onto the ambassador in a way that compounds in value the longer the relationship runs. Lisa operates almost exclusively in this third tier. Her appointment as a global ambassador for Celine, the French fashion house, was the arrangement that positioned her as a genuine participant in the conversation about international style authority. Not a regional representative, but a figure the brand was building its global narrative around. Her subsequent designation as a global ambassador for Bulgari, the Italian luxury jeweler, extended that positioning into fine jewelry and high-end accessory categories. Bulgari's ambassador roster has historically included names that carry the kind of global recognition that the brand considers synonymous with its own aspiration level. Lisa's inclusion in that tier was, for people who track these signals carefully, a meaningful statement about how seriously the luxury industry was taking her commercial pull. Then came Nike, an interesting addition because it positioned her in the athletic and performance lifestyle space, alongside figures whose global brand recognition operates at a scale that transcends any single entertainment category. Then Louis Vuitton, whose parent company LVMH controls the largest portfolio of luxury goods brands in the world and protects its ambassador relationships with unusual contractual care. Then MAC Cosmetics, which extended her commercial footprint into the beauty and personal care category, a sector where digital conversion rates for trusted celebrity ambassadors can be tracked in near real time. Each deal was additive, not just in financial terms, but in what is sometimes described as brand signal. The logic of luxury is referential. The brands you're associated with determine which brands want to be associated with you next. Lisa was engineering a portfolio effect, where every appointment increased the implied valuation of the next negotiation. The precise financial terms of these arrangements are private, as they are for virtually all celebrity brand partnerships at this level. But the economics of global luxury ambassadorships are well documented in aggregate. Analysts who track celebrity brand economics have established reference ranges. A global ambassador role at a Tier 1 LVMH level or Kering level house typically commands annual retainers that range from the low millions into the mid-8-figure range, depending on exclusivity scope, campaign integration requirements, and the verified commercial impact the ambassador generates. That last variable, verified commercial impact, is where Lisa's numbers become structurally important. When Lisa promotes a product, the measurable downstream effects, search volume spikes, sellout velocities, social sentiment shifts, conversion data on tracked links, consistently outperform category benchmarks. Her documented commercial influence on product performance is not theoretical. It is a number that brands can calculate and that they factor directly into what they're willing to pay. But here's where it gets interesting. The most sophisticated of these arrangements have moved beyond a simple fee-for-image model. Lisa's creative involvement in how brands present themselves, her input on visual direction, her co-development participation in certain product contexts, her role in shaping the cultural narrative around campaigns suggests a partnership dynamic where she's not simply the medium but part of the message itself. That's a structurally different relationship. And it's a preview of the larger transition she was already engineering behind the scenes. What happened next was the move that changed the financial architecture entirely. And we're getting to that in just a moment. The pivot, what the LLOUD and RCA move really means. In 2023, Lisa made the decision that, viewed through a financial lens, is arguably the single most consequential strategic move of her career. She left YG Entertainment. And then she built something. The departure from YG was widely reported as a story about creative freedom, and those motivations were almost certainly genuine. But framing the move as primarily artistic obscures the financial logic that makes it so significant, and that logic is worth working through carefully. Under the standard contractual framework of a major K-pop entertainment label, the artist generates revenue through multiple channels: music sales, streaming, touring, brand partnerships, merchandise. The label, in most configurations, retains the master recordings, the actual audio files that represent the definitive commercial version of every song. This means that whenever a song is licensed to a film, a commercial, a streaming service, or a sync placement, the entity collecting the primary economic benefit of that transaction is the label, not the artist. The artist receives a royalty percentage, and in many cases, that percentage is calculated after recoupment of the label's development investment. For an artist with Lisa's commercial profile, this structure represents a ceiling. Not a ceiling on talent, not a ceiling on fame, a ceiling on equity accumulation. Lisa founded LLOUD, her own independent label entity and management infrastructure. And then she structured a deal with RCA Records under the Sony Music umbrella for distribution. This is the distinction that most coverage of this story glossed over, and it matters enormously. Lisa did not sign to RCA as a traditional signed artist, surrendering master rights and accepting an advance against future royalties. The arrangement was structured as a distribution deal, in which LLOUD, Lisa's company, retains ownership of the master recordings, and RCA provides the distribution. Infrastructure: the global release pipelines, the streaming platform relationships, the playlist positioning power, the radio promotion apparatus, the international marketing reach. In simple terms, the label used to own the building and pay Lisa a percentage of the rent. Now Lisa owns the building, and the distributor helps manage it in exchange for a fee. This is not a new concept in the Western music industry. The conversation around master ownership has been brought into public consciousness through a number of high-profile disputes involving legacy artists who signed as teenagers and spent decades fighting to reclaim control of their catalogs. What's different about Lisa's situation is the timing. She executed this transition in her mid-20s, at the point where her solo commercial trajectory was clearly established, but before the full scale of her long-term earning potential had been factored into any arrangement. She moved from tenant to landlord while the building's value was still being appraised. Why does master ownership matter over the long arc? Because music catalogs are financial assets, and they behave like assets in ways that ongoing performance fees do not. A catalog generates royalty income for decades. When a streaming platform pays for plays, when a film production pays for a sync license, when an advertising agency pays for a commercial placement, the master owner collects. A well-performing catalog can be leveraged for financing. It can be sold. It can be transferred. It appreciates in value as the artist's reputation grows. And it continues generating income even when the artist is not actively performing. The music industry has watched catalog valuations reach extraordinary levels over the past decade. Investors, private equity firms, and dedicated music rights funds have paid 8, 9, and 10-figure sums for catalogs belonging to established artists, precisely because the royalty income is durable, contractually predictable, and largely recession-proof. Lisa, by taking ownership of her catalog from the beginning of her independent career, is building an asset base that will compound in value in ways that performance fees never can. There is one more dimension of this story that sits underneath everything we've discussed so far, and it may be the most underexamined factor in her financial equation. It has everything to do with where she comes from and what that means in dollar terms. The multiplier: how geography and fandom create leverage. Consider this question carefully, because the answer is counterintuitive. What is the single largest multiplier of a global entertainer's commercial value? It's not streaming numbers in isolation. It's not follower counts. It's not even the size of individual brand deal fees. Those metrics matter, but they describe the surface of the financial structure, not its foundation. The most powerful multiplier is market redundancy. The ability to be genuinely, commercially, measurably valuable in multiple distinct consumer markets simultaneously. Markets that don't simply overlap, but that actually reinforce each other while delivering non-duplicative audience reach. Lisa is Thai, not Thai adjacent, not broadly Asian in the way a marketing brief sometimes lazily defines that term. She is specifically, recognizably, and proudly Thai, and in Thailand and across the wider Southeast Asian region, that identity carries commercial weight that is structurally different from anything K-pop star status alone could generate. She is, across brand surveys and public recognition studies, the country's most globally prominent living celebrity. Her face is associated with authentic national pride in a way that's genuinely rare for an entertainer whose career is centered outside their home country. In commercial terms, this means that the Thai domestic market, and by extension the broader ASEAN economic bloc that looks to Thai cultural exports for cues, offers a parallel revenue landscape entirely distinct from her K-pop base. Thai brands, Thai tourism campaigns, Thai government cultural export initiatives, and pan-Southeast Asian marketing strategies all converge on a single, obvious spokesperson. And the Southeast Asian luxury consumer market is growing at a pace that the global luxury industry is tracking with considerable attention. The emerging upper-middle and affluent classes in Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the surrounding region represent some of the fastest expanding luxury spending cohorts in the world. When Bulgari or Louis Vuitton designates Lisa as a global ambassador, they are not simply reaching Thai consumers in Thailand. They are reaching aspirational consumers across an entire regional identity ecosystem, one where Lisa functions as a genuine cultural anchor, not an imported Western ideal imposed on a foreign market. That is a categorically different marketing proposition, and it commands premium positioning in how brands allocate their ambassador budgets. Simultaneously, Lisa's entry into Western mainstream cultural consciousness has been methodical and escalating. Her solo artistic releases have been designed with Western production sensibilities that complement rather than dilute her K-pop identity. Her presence at international fashion weeks has embedded her in the global style media cycle. Her live performance choices have placed her in front of European and American audiences who consume prestige cultural content and luxury lifestyle media, the exact demographic that commands the highest advertising rates in digital media. The economic consequence of this three-market structure is a multiplier effect that most entertainers simply never achieve. An artist who dominates a single market, regardless of how large that market is, faces a natural earning ceiling determined by that market's size and the depth of the brand relationship that's possible within it. An artist who holds genuine standing in three structurally distinct markets, the global K-pop audience, the Southeast Asian mainstream, and the Western premium lifestyle segment, is delivering something categorically different. They are offering non-overlapping reach, access to audiences that a brand cannot aggregate through any other single partnership. Advertisers price this carefully and competitively. And the premium they're willing to pay for genuine multi-market reach, especially when it's backed by the kind of documented commercial conversion data Lisa generates, is substantial. But the geographic multiplier doesn't only affect brand deal rates. It affects every dimension of her financial architecture. It affects touring economics, where she can fill arenas across multiple regions at premium ticket prices. It affects streaming royalty geography, where she generates meaningful per-stream income across multiple high-revenue streaming markets simultaneously. And it affects the long-term valuation of her music catalog, because catalog assets with proven performance in multiple high-income markets are worth more to buyers and licensors than catalogs with concentrated regional performance. Every piece of the strategy connects to every other piece. And stepping back to see the full structure is what the final chapter of this story is about. Strip away the celebrity context. Remove the brand names, the fashion weeks, the music videos, the streaming charts. Look only at the underlying financial architecture. What you find is something that any serious wealth strategist would recognize as disciplined, fundamentally sound, and impressively sequenced. Lisa converted her position as a labor asset, a productive input in someone else's revenue-generating machine, into an equity position in her own branded enterprise. She diversified her income across multiple structurally uncorrelated streams, music royalties, brand partnerships, live performance, catalog rights, and her own label infrastructure. She built geographic market diversification into her identity, deliberately and systematically, not accidentally. She timed her independence move to coincide with a moment when her solo commercial proof points were strong enough to give her genuine leverage with a major distribution partner, rather than leaving a label position with nothing but potential and no bargaining power. And she did all of this before turning 30. That last point is not a minor biographical footnote. It is the most financially significant fact in the entire story. Because the mechanism that transforms earned income into lasting wealth is compounding. And compounding rewards time above all other variables. An asset base built at 26 grows differently over the next 40 years than the same asset base built at 46. The catalog Lisa owns today will generate royalties across a timeline that extends well beyond any individual career peak. The brand equity she's accumulating now becomes the negotiating foundation for every business relationship she enters in the next decade. Consider the pattern that emerges when you look across multiple decades of entertainment industry history. The artists who converted significant fame into significant lasting wealth across music, film, sports, and adjacent creative industries share a profile that is remarkably consistent regardless of genre or era. At some point in their careers, often at a critical inflection point of maximum leverage, they stopped thinking of themselves primarily as performers and started thinking of themselves as portfolio managers. They made moves that were less about the next creative project and more about the long-term structure of who owned what. They acquired catalogs. They built labels. They invested in production companies and fashion ventures and consumer goods businesses. They surrounded themselves with legal and financial advisors whose primary mandate was asset accumulation, not deal facilitation. The cautionary tale that runs through entertainment history is well populated. Performers who earned extraordinary sums at their peak and arrived at the back half of their careers with nothing durable to show for it, because the structure of their deals was designed by parties whose interests were not identical to their own. Those stories exist across every genre and every generation, and they share a common thread. The performer was the asset, but someone else was the owner. What Lisa appears to have understood, and understood early, is that the transition from asset to owner is not automatic. It requires deliberate structural decisions, made at the right moment, with the right legal and financial architecture in place. The LLOUD formation wasn't a management convenience. It was an ownership declaration. The RCA deal wasn't a label contract. It was a distribution agreement designed to preserve equity while accessing infrastructure. The luxury brand portfolio wasn't a collection of endorsement fees. It was a systematic building of commercial credibility across multiple market contexts. Now, intellectual honesty requires acknowledging what we don't know. The precise terms of her contracts are not public. Her full net worth is not publicly disclosed with verified precision. The internal financial structure of LLOUD is not a matter of public record. What's been described in this video is constructed from verified public announcements, industry-standard economic modeling, and the observable pattern of her strategic decisions over time. The full picture exists in documents that are, appropriately, private, but the direction is clear. And in financial analysis, direction is often more informative than a single point-in-time valuation. Wealth that is being built, that is accumulating structural assets, diversifying income streams, and expanding market reach, is fundamentally different from wealth that is being earned and spent. Lisa's financial story has the characteristics of the former, which brings us to the question this video began with. Not the answer, because that's already been delivered, but the forward-looking version of it. Because the story isn't finished. Lisa is in her late 20s. She is managing an independent label, a multi-continent brand portfolio, a growing music catalog that she owns outright, and a market presence in multiple high-value regions simultaneously. In an entertainment industry being fundamentally reshaped by direct-to-fan distribution models, by the collapse of traditional gatekeeping infrastructure, and by the globalization of premium cultural content, her positioning is not simply advantageous. It is structurally aligned with where power in the industry is moving. The question worth holding as this chapter of her story continues to unfold is not whether Lisa has been financially successful. That is, at this point, beyond debate. The question is whether what she has built represents a ceiling or a foundation. Given the architecture she's laid, given the assets she now owns, given the compounding curve that's just beginning, everything suggests the answer is the latter. And that might be the most interesting financial story of her generation.